Welcome in, everyone, and thank you for listening to the 101st ever episode of the Missouri Sports Podcast, brought to you by 106 Apparel and recording from the Revel Advertising Studio in beautiful Springfield, Missouri. I'm one of your hosts, Cameron Albert, alongside my good friend and fellow Mizzou fan, Kyle DeVries. How are you doing today, Kyle?
I'm great today, Cameron. How are you?
I'm doing well.
You know, it's August now, and it's usually the time of year that I'm firing up my NCAA football video game.
Oh, yeah.
For a while, for some reason, I thought I had NCAA 14. I actually have 12, which is kind of sketchy. But every year when I turn it on, it's great. There's a few little things here and there, but this year is definitely the year where it might be my last, because it's like shutting down between every game, freezing up. It takes like, from the time I turn on my Xbox to the time I actually start playing a game, it's like 10 minutes because everything loads so slowly. So this might be the final year. I've almost like just kind of given up on it this year. But
yeah, I've had the same experience when I actually do have NCAA football 14.
Wow. Privileged.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've talked about before on here how I have to, I hold my breath, cross my fingers when, sometimes it'll give that camera angle where you're just like, are we going to move on to the next play, or are we going to be in this?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Like video game purgatory for 8 minutes and then the game's going to crash.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if it lasts like more than 10 or 12 seconds, it's over. Sorry, man.
Sometimes I just get up and do something else, and then like 1 out of 10 times it'll actually come back.
Really? Wow.
And I actually figured something out. What did I figure out? I turn off my controller, and then the Xbox is like, oh, your controller is disconnected. Then I plug the controller back in, and sometimes that like gets it going.
Wow, that's genius.
Yeah. It happened by accident the first time, and I was like, oh, wow. I figured out a trick. Kyle, last week we had our 100th episode, so we had a big old party celebration.
Quite the bash that was.
And so if you missed that one, go back and check it out. Just giving everybody something to look forward to for next week. Producer Cameron and I are going to be out of town, so Kyle's going to do the podcast solo. Just kidding.
Ryan Russillo style.
Yeah. Just kidding. Kyle can do that if he wants. He might have to do the news segment by himself. But we recorded another interview, and we're going to slide it into next week's episode. And we really think you're going to enjoy that one. It was a blast to record. Answered a lot of pretty in-depth questions about Mizzou, a Mizzou sport with some insider knowledge that was bestowed upon us. So be looking for that next week. This week we have a little bit of news, and then we're going to talk about basketball recruiting. We're going to look at the 2020 class and compare the class to our predictions from a year ago of how we thought the class would look. And then we're going to talk about 2021, give our predictions for that class, and then just give a little peek into 2022. Before we do any of that, let's do a little bit of news here. Did you see Michael Porter Jr.?
Yeah, he's on
fire. Did you know he's good at basketball?
I had forgotten for a while, but he is resurrected, and he's really good.
Yeah.
He scored like 30 and 37 points the last 2 games they've played.
Career high points and turned around career high rebounds with 15.
That's remarkable. Like, I knew he could do it, but I'm not sure that I saw it happening this quickly.
Still 22 years old.
Yeah.
So obviously
he still doesn't look like as explosive of a player. Like, he looks like a different player in a good way. He's not dunking on people or anything, but I mean, then again, this is the NBA versus like he's playing at Tolton in high school, so it's obviously different. But and maybe he'll get to that point. I don't know if he's like 100% healthy or what he would describe himself as, but he looks good.
I mean, he played like 43 minutes in that overtime win for the Nuggets, so he must be feeling pretty good to have that kind of minutes.
Yeah.
Another former Mizzou player, this time on the football side, Marcus Golden. His name comes up in our interview. He signed a 1-year, $5.1 million deal with the New York Giants.
As somebody who I think he led the NFL in sacks last year or 2 years ago, I kind of thought he might be able to get more money than that. I mean, that's a tremendous amount of money. Good for him, but I actually think that he deserved more than that.
Well, yeah, the the 1 year deal is kind of interesting to me because, sometimes guys obviously want that security sometimes of a multi-year deal.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw this being described as a prove it deal.
Okay.
So a 1 year contract, really ball out, and then maybe you'd be in line for a longer term deal, a little bit more.
Needs a new agent.
Maybe so. maybe so. Let's see here. You want to talk about the NBA draft deadline has passed. So any college players that were thinking about returning had to make their decision. And I'll just rattle off some names here from the SEC, some notable names that will be returning. John Petty, Isaiah Joe, Keontae Johnson, Trendon Watford, Javonte Smart, Devontae Shuler, John Fulkerson, Yves Pons.
Yeah, that's a lot of talent that's coming back to the SEC next year. I would have to assume that a lot of that has to do with just the instability of everything going on in society right now. But that.
What are you talking about?
Oh, nothing.
Okay.
Just a literal pandemic. So, I don't know. The SEC is really stacked next year, and Missouri's strength next year was experience, but a lot of other programs are looking very experienced at this point in time. So that looks like a little less promising for Missouri's chances to make a run, but you never know.
Arkansas getting Isaiah Joe back is huge.
That is huge.
And definitely not something we like to see from our rivals to the south. Keontae Johnson, I think, I kind of always pegged him as a 3-4 year guy, mainly just because of his size. It doesn't quite translate to the NBA, but he is a beast of a college basketball player. So him coming back to Florida is worrisome. LSU just seems like they're going to be sticking around. Same with Tennessee. I don't really see them falling off too much, especially with the recruiting wins both of those programs have had in recent years. Tennessee, I mean, they're almost identical as far as how they've, kind of built themselves up into the upper echelon of the SEC, and they just
Rick
keep
Barnes
it rolling.
has been really good there. Hey, but look at that Missouri 2020 recruiting class, though.
Let's talk about that. We'll move right along into the topic of the show, which is Missouri's recruiting. So 2 years ago, we talked about the 2019 class. We correctly predicted that Trey Jackson and Mario McKinney would end up as Missouri Tigers. I thought that maybe Rocket Watts. I went out on a limb and said that. You predicted that they would land E.J. Liddell. Your prediction was a little bit closer than mine, but we both ended up just getting 2 out of 3. Last year, our predictions were not so good.
Did we feel like we had to just make a prediction? Like, did we feel like we had to predict somebody to Mizzou? I don't know, because when I really
go
thought
back and
about
listen to it, there's one guy here that we felt really good about coming to Missouri, and that was Cam Fletcher. We both predicted that he would be a Missouri Tiger, and we talked about him visiting Kentucky, like the week that we were talking about it, he was visiting Kentucky. And we said if he comes out of that visit, we thought there was a chance that they would pressure him into committing on that trip. We said if he makes it out of that trip without committing, then I feel pretty good about him coming to Missouri. So we both predicted him to Missouri. We both were pretty... we were both wrong, yeah. And that one still is a little bit of a head-scratcher for me. Just doesn't seem like the best fit, especially when you look at all the players Kentucky is bringing in around him in the 2020 class. I wish him nothing but success, but just looking at the situation there, it doesn't seem like it's set up for him to be successful.
I will not dispute that.
Then we talked about Caleb Love. We both said that he would not end up at Missouri. You correctly predicted he would go to North Carolina. I thought maybe he'd end up at Virginia. I kind of just wanted to not say the exact same thing as you. And he went to North Carolina. So both he and Josh Christopher, I think, were closer to coming to Mizzou than we thought they would be when we recorded the episode. So we were both pretty down on that, although I did say that I thought Missouri would land Josh Christopher. You thought he would go to Kentucky, and he ended up at Arizona State. So those were the big three. We thought, we specifically said they have to get one of these guys to maintain the momentum that Konzo has had, or any kind of momentum, and they were 0 for 3.
Yeah, I would say the Caleb Love recruitment ended up being much closer for Missouri than I ever would have imagined it being. I remember on last year's episode, we were listening to it a little bit earlier, I was going to just be happy if they made it his top 5 or top 6. And I thought even at that point, that might just be kind of a courtesy thing. But I genuinely think that Caleb Love considered Missouri all the way to the end. And I think it was down to them in North Carolina. And there was a point in time where, if he would have committed to Missouri, that it wouldn't have completely shocked me. That's, I think, how close it got at the end of his recruitment. Just another classic heartbreaker story for us.
Yeah.
But I think he will be fantastic in North Carolina. He's an incredible player, so well-rounded, has every tool in the toolbox that you could possibly want in a basketball player.
And North Carolina will have no issue putting players around him to be incredibly successful.
Yeah, and I feel like playing time's not always something that you can give at a school like that, but I really think that is a possibility that he starts at North Carolina this year.
Yeah, I think a completely different situation for him there than Cam Fletcher at Kentucky.
Oh, 100%.
And I would not be surprised at all to see Caleb Love starting on a Final Four team at North Carolina. Now let's talk about Josh Christopher. This was maybe the biggest heartbreak for me because I don't know, I just thought maybe the family tie, and Nicodemus just always talking up Konzo Martin to Josh's dad and stuff like that. I thought maybe that would be enough to bring it home. Michigan came on strong. We both completely discounted Michigan.
They kind of came out of nowhere, yeah.
And so they came out of nowhere and were a big player there at the end. But then he kind of surprised everybody and ended up choosing Arizona State to play with his brother.
Yeah, I feel like some of those West Coast schools were always kind of there, like Arizona State, UCLA. But I'm not sure that I ever really gave them much of a shot. I kind of thought it would be Mizzou or Michigan. But yeah, that was a little bit surprising. His recruitment was wild too, man. It was long. I mean, he just committed not that long ago. It was like a few months ago. So I don't know. That was a roller coaster.
Yeah, we just talked about that not too long ago. You also thought that maybe Davion Bradford could end up at Missouri. We tossed around Luke Kasubke, but they both ended up at Kansas State.
I actually think that it's possible Missouri could have gotten Davion Bradford if they really wanted him. There were some rumors that Missouri just liked Jordan Wilmore better and kind of took him over Davion Bradford. That it's probably wouldn't have been my choice necessarily, but you never know. And that story may not be true at all. Jordan Wilmore might have been plan B for Davion Bradford. I don't know, but.
And then I think Kasubke was just recruited over. I mean, that he was definitely a backup option for some of these other wings and guards, and he just couldn't really wait on all these other guys, especially like Josh Christopher, to make his decision so late. He had to find a landing spot, and I think Kansas State will be a really good spot for him. So, we end up with a one-man class, including the one and only Jordan Wilmore. And so he'll be, I think, relied upon to some extent to kind of be the backup for Tillman, kind of maybe take on some of those minutes that Reed Nico was providing. And I don't know, maybe we'll see more Mitchell Smith at the 5 or just like smaller lineups and stuff like that. But if they need some depth at the 5, Jordan Wilmore's the guy. So they're going to have to just throw him right in there, I think.
I think you're probably right. And ideally, we're not in a situation where we have to rely on a guy that, to me, seems clearly like a developmental prospect. I mean, he's literally, 7'3"?
Yeah.
Kind of a 2-star recruit. He's not super highly ranked, not really putting up huge numbers or anything at the high school level. So it's not ideal that we should have to rely on him to come in and contribute, but that's just kind of the spot we've been in for the last 5 years, is we just kind of have relied on their freshmen and the sophomores to carry the team a little bit.
Yeah, so Missouri also added transfers in Drew Buggs and Ed Chang. So that's something that we're probably going to keep seeing for the next few years is a combination of traditional high school recruits as well as transfers making up the classes. So with that being said, let's move on to the class of 2021. And something that's unique this year is we already have a commitment on the board in Springfield's own Anton Brookshire. So this is the first time we've had an official commitment to Missouri at this time of year when we kind of preview what we think the class will look like. So that's different, but it's good that we have somebody on board to fill one of 5 remaining scholarships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely exciting. We've got a pretty nice list of guys here, of guys that Missouri's going after right now. Some that I think they've got a pretty good shot at, others probably not, but Anton is really up there with some of the more exciting players on this list that I think we have today.
Yeah, the list today is a little bit different than the last 2 years.
Yeah.
There's not really any headline-grabbing guys.
Yeah.
And we are very much looking at a class of 2 to 4 traditional high school recruits, and then not a handful, but 2 or 3 transfers, I think, making up the new additions to Missouri basketball next year. But yeah, the marquee names just aren't there. I mean, Missouri offered guys like Chet Holmgren, Patrick Baldwin, Peyton Watson, who just committed to UCLA. They offered those kind of guys. It just wasn't happening. Kennedy Chandler, handful of Michigan guys that either committed to an in-state school or have already trimmed Missouri from their list. So we're left with maybe some under-recruited guys, some developmental guys, and even some of these, I think, will pick schools of potentially a higher caliber than Missouri. Where do you want to begin? You want to just go down through the list and talk about some of the ones we have our eyes on?
Yeah, we kind of talked about some names before the show, and we can kind of just run down in the order that we talked about them. But the first one we talked about was Yayakita, and he's at DeSmet. He's a 6'9" power forward. And there's a little bit of, I think we're a little bit unsure if he actually has a Missouri offer. I'm pretty sure that was reported at one time, but he's not listed on 24/7 as having an offer. So it seems like a little bit of inconsistency across the board on whether or not that offer is really there.
Yeah, a guy I think that Missouri should want to have as a part of this class. All these guys, there's no just day one contributors. I think even the best players on this list are guys that aren't going to play a whole lot as underclassmen, whether they have some bulking up to do or just some skills to refine. And Yayakita, I think, fits that description where he just is a really good athlete, a little bit raw, needs to spend some time just in a high-level basketball environment. And I think he will get a lot more of that this upcoming season at DeSmet. But then a couple years in a college program, and then I think he would be ready to contribute meaningful minutes in, conference play as a junior or senior.
Yeah, he's definitely had some electrifying highlights, some big dunks and stuff like that. I think we're gonna try and make some predictions on some of these guys as something to kind of look back on in the future. So honestly, I'm fairly low on Missouri's recruiting right now. There's just not. And maybe it's just the fact that there's some radio silence and we don't really know what's going on. That plays into it, but I'm not super excited about things going on right now. But
and just the momentum's not there.
Exactly. So I'm going to say Yayakita is plan B or plan C for some of the guys, maybe farther down the list, but Missouri misses on a couple of those guys and he ends up at Missouri.
I think that's a very valid prediction. It's just so hard to really have a good grip on what the staff is thinking and
it is
that sort of thing. I have to go along with what you're saying right now. Let me jump right back to that after we talk about the next guy on my list, David Joplin. He is a guy that I think is one of the higher priorities for Missouri in this class, but one that I honestly think they're going to miss on. There's been some rumblings lately, some predictions made that he's going to end up at Texas, and I can't really disagree with any of that assessment. Mm-hmm. And I think that is one of those guys that Missouri will miss on, that will lead them back to Yayakita as mm-hmm. being a post presence that they can rely on in that class.
Yeah, there was some rumblings that he would end up at Texas, as well as potentially commit pretty soon, like maybe even the next couple of days. But I think that there may be they might be rethinking that a little bit. I think that he's probably pumped the brakes on that a little bit. I don't know what that means for his recruitment with Texas or with anyone else, but I have no reason to believe that he will end up not going to Texas, because that seems to be the lean at the moment.
Yeah, he's from Wisconsin. He's a 6'7" forward, but he's built more like a big than a wing player, I would say. Let's see here. I'm going to skip around just a little bit. A guy that we've talked about a couple times on this podcast is Zack Hicks. His family has been very vocal in showing their support for his recruitment from Missouri. So that's always good to have the family on board. He's from New Jersey. He is a 6'7" forward. And then with him, we're looking at more of like a wing player than a post player. He's got an offer list that's really short as of right now. Missouri's really the only Power 5 team that has offered him still, according to 24/7. Other offers include Drexel, LaSalle, Richmond, Siena. Man, it's just, there's just a slew of forwards that mm-hmm. It's so hard to tell where the staff is at with these guys, because he's not even ranked nationally by 24/7 Sports. Yeah,
I think there was, we heard that he wanted to wait a little while to make a commitment, just understandably, because he's not really get
his profile up.
Yeah, he's not. No one's watching him play right now, so I think he wanted to see if he could hold out a little bit longer and get some bigger offers. That could be true. That also could be maybe because he's not first priority with Mizzou. Mizzou might not take a commitment from him at the moment. Those things might both be true, but I ultimately think Zack Hicks will end up at Missouri at some point or another. It might be winter or even next spring, but I think that he will eventually commit to Missouri.
Man, I just don't know if I'm quite ready to make a prediction here. I gotta think through a couple of these other options first. Let's move on to a guy that we know plenty about, Tamar Bates. Tamar Bates from the Kansas City area. He is going to be at IMG Academy in Florida for his senior season of basketball. Very impressive offer list, including Alabama, Colorado, Kansas, Iowa State, Kansas State, Northwestern, Oklahoma, Oregon, Virginia Tech, Wichita State, and of course Missouri. Man, Tamar Bates is the exact kind of player that I think Konzo needs to be bringing in one or two like him each recruiting class, just like that top 100, top 125 type player mm-hmm. Who is just known as a shot maker. Mm-hmm. You gotta be able to inject some offense or just some potential for offense into the recruiting classes.
Yeah,
and I think that's something that obviously we're not getting that in Jordan Wilmore. He could be, a fantastic player, but we're not injecting any offense into the program by bringing him in. Now, maybe he could be a productive offensive player later, but
100%.
We're not going to see that right away.
I agree with you. Tamar Bates, I just have a really hard time seeing him go anywhere other than Kansas at this point. And I hope our listeners don't take this the wrong way, because I hate Kansas with everything within my soul, but I'm really kind of envious of Bill Self's recruiting strategy, man. Like he goes out and gets the kind of players that I'd love to see us get. That would be realistic. Kind of those 3 and 4 year players, those really talented guys who stick around and play forever, and they might not be a great fit to be a one and done, and just the guys that make great college programs. And it seems like recently, whenever maybe Kansas had been a little bit. Maybe they knew that they were being watched a little bit. They started changing their strategy a little bit because they were going for the top of the top recruits for a little while there. But it seems like the last few years they've really kind of changed their strategy a little bit and gone for those kind of 4-star players that'll stick around for a while. And it's making life difficult on the other programs that are trying to make a living off those players.
Yeah, who's the kid that's at Kansas right now that was from Missouri?
I know who exactly you're talking about, but he kind of has a tough name to pronounce.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I would want to attempt it.
Especially without looking at it.
Yeah.
Anyway, he, I think, was from, I can't remember what town in Missouri he was from, but Konzo just didn't recruit him.
And he's having an incredible career at Kansas right now.
And he is, on some NBA draft big boards right now after 2, maybe 3 years at Kansas. So, yeah, those are the type of players that, man, it just hurts so much when you under-recruit a guy. We saw it during the Kim Anderson era, but there was just no desire for these guys to come play for him.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have a coach who can be successful at this program and he's just missing on a few guys in the home state, just not really recruiting them at all, that's just completely demoralizing for the fan base. A fan base like our listeners who are going to be up on, which guys we should be going after. I mean, we didn't really add Jordan Nesbit to our list for that reason. He's not being recruited by Missouri.
Exactly. I was going to throw that in there, actually. So since we're talking about it, what do you think is going to happen with Jordan Nesbit's recruitment? He's been offered by everybody under the sun except for Mizzou.
I think he's going to go to like an Iowa or
I was thinking
Mississippi State or something like that.
Yeah, something regional, like maybe a Creighton or something like that. I think he has a Creighton offer.
Mm-hmm. And I think he's going to, my prediction is he will go to a program with a better average KenPom rating than Missouri during the time that Konzo Martin has been the coach.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we just saw a recruit, a marquee recruit in Trey Jackson go transfer to Seton Hall, who is a top 50 program. And Missouri has not been close to that really outside of Konzo Martin's first season. I mean, they've been kind of borderline and had some preseason expectations in that ballpark multiple times now, but the end of the season results just haven't really shown that. So yeah, I think Jordan Nesbit is going to go to a program that if you just look at numbers in the last 5 years or so, you could objectively say is currently a better program than Missouri.
I agree.
Let's see here. Yeah, I think I'm going to predict that Tamar Bates ends up at Kansas as well. Now let's talk about a big man by the name of Loganlanders. Loganlanders is a 6'10" center from Wisconsin. He has offers from Houston, Iowa, Kansas, Kansas State, and Miami, among others. I'll be honest with you, I don't know much about Loganlanders. I've watched a couple videos on him. He is just a big guy who he knows how to use his body at a young age where he can just kind of take over games.
Yeah, he's very mobile.
Yeah, and just seems like he possesses the skill to use his size to do whatever he wants to do on the basketball court.
Yeah, he can shoot too. Honestly, I am shocked he doesn't have a Wisconsin offer yet, but I think he will get that eventually. I mean, he just seems like a prototypical Wisconsin big man who can move, who can shoot. I just don't see how he doesn't end up at Wisconsin. It just seems like he was born to go to college there. If not, I still, I don't know that Missouri has a shot at him, but I actually feel like I've written other players off at this point. But I still feel like he's realistic. And he would truly potentially be a game changer if Missouri was able to land him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I have to agree with you on Wisconsin, especially considering they're not really in on anybody else in state.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Patrick Baldwin is from Wisconsin. He's not going to Wisconsin. Most likely he's going to be at Duke, I would say. But yeah, I think that Wisconsin prediction is pretty spot on. Let me look something up here. Next player on my list is Sean Duru-Gordon. We talked about him when he got a Mizzou offer. He has actually an interesting offer list, in my opinion. He started to come on a little bit as of late, with offers from Arizona State, Auburn, Georgia, Penn State, Seton Hall, and then of course Missouri. He is, believe it or not, a 6'7" forward. We talk about the 6'7" forwards all the time because that's what Missouri's been going after, and I think for good reason. You're talking about guys that could maybe defend the 2, the 3, or the 4 in college.
Yeah.
And he's got some pretty good size to him. He's ranked 235th in the nation and 5th highest ranked player in the state of New York.
Yeah, he was definitely a little bit more under the radar, I think, when Missouri offered him. I think they got to him fairly early. A lot of those schools you listed, I think, have been pretty recently. But at the time, I really felt like, Missouri might be onto something here. They might be kind of getting in on a guy before he blows up. I really don't have a feel for where they stand with him, but I really like his game. He's more like a wing, more so than a big man, kind of like the opposite of someone we talked about previously, David Joplin, I think. But he's more kind of a ball handler, and he can play on the outside. I don't really envision him playing down low very much, but he's certainly an interesting prospect. And yeah, from the Northeast, I think New York, you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but not really like a strong New York or Northeast presence in his offer list.
Yeah, maybe like Seton Hall and Penn State, but that was really it.
Yep.
I don't even think I can make a prediction for him, honestly. It's too early.
One that I am absolutely ready to make a prediction for is Caleb Brown. He is the younger brother of Kobe Brown, and we know how much the staff, especially Conzo Martin, loves Kobe Brown, loves what he got from him his freshman year. Kobe Brown started some games, played meaningful minutes, and his little brother is a 6'6" guard, handles the ball really well. He can shoot okay. He would be considered a reach, I think, if it weren't for the family connection. But if Kobe can convince him that he needs to come to Missouri and chill out on the bench for a little while and develop, he's just got the size. His size matched with his skill is just not something you get from every high school recruit. Mm-hmm. So maybe maybe a little bit of a developmental prospect. But at the same time, I could see him really, if he puts together a nice senior season in high school, I think he could see some more big-time offers roll in.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that he will end up at Missouri. It seems like the Browns have a great relationship with Conzo. Kobe got a lot of playing time his freshman year. I have no reason to believe that's going to change in the future. It seems like that's just a good connection between Conzo and the Brown family. I think Caleb will end up there.
He does have a few other Power 5 offers in Minnesota, Ole Miss, and Penn State, as well as Virginia Tech. Penn State, in on a lot of the same players as Missouri currently. Okay, let's see here. So, did I miss anybody that we really want to spotlight here?
Oh, I'd like to throw a wrench in the list.
Let's hear it.
I'd like to add a JUCO player that was offered by Missouri today.
Oh, okay.
And we didn't even talk about this player before because literally you were out of the room getting water before the show started, and I saw this on Twitter. Missouri has offered Chris Payton, who is from Indian Hills JUCO, 6'7" forward.
Oh, another one. What's his last name?
Chris Payton. That's his full name. Payton. And I don't know anything about him. I literally just read that on a tweet.
Let's see here. I hate to break it to you, Kyle, and I probably shouldn't say this because maybe Conzo will rescind his offer. He's listed on the Indian Hills website as being 6'6".
That is unfortunate.
He's originally from Bloomington, Illinois, and it looks like he averaged 11.5 points per game at Indian Hills last year.
Underwhelming stats. That is on brand.
Yep. Well, before we talk too much about JUCO transfers or traditional transfers or anything like that, let's take one quick look over the high school recruits one more time. So we already have Anton Brookshire on board. I think you and I agree on Caleb. Oh man, Caleb Brown.
We both agree Caleb Love is going to North Carolina.
Yeah, we both agree on Caleb Brown, and I will echo your thoughts on Yayakita. So there's 3, and you like Zack Hicks to Mizzou.
I do.
So with your scenario there, we got 4 incoming freshmen, and with the departure of Axel Okongo, I think that still leaves 2 open scholarships. So how would you want to see those last 2 filled? It would be completely unreasonable, I think, to even add a 5th traditional high school recruit, let alone a 6th.
Yeah, I think I would like to see probably 2, like a traditional transfer and probably a grad transfer would probably be how I'd like to see that dispersed. If sometimes that there can be JUCO transfers that work and that makes sense. I typically feel like JUCO players don't make a huge impact, and it just kind of depends. As people, we live in Springfield, we go to Missouri State games. I think JUCO players can definitely make a difference on Missouri Valley level, but you don't typically hear about a lot of JUCO players making a big difference at the Power 5 level.
But we do see plenty of grad transfers come in.
Absolutely.
And really make a huge difference.
Absolutely. I think that excites me more is other transfers from the D1 level.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you there. I just can't really predict anything with Zack Hicks. I mean, the relationship seems really strong. I just am afraid that we may be looking at something similar to a Lucas Subke situation, where Missouri, in this situation, I don't know who they're holding out for exactly, but, maybe there's a few guys that Missouri is really waiting on, and Zack Hicks feels like once he gets a few more of those offers rolling in, if Missouri's not ready to take him, he's going to have to just find a landing spot.
That's fair.
So I'm kind of scared of that situation there, so I'm just going to stick with Brookshire, Kita, and Caleb Brown, and then I wouldn't mind seeing a traditional transfer that maybe sits 1 and plays 2, hopefully from another Power 5 conference, and then a grad transfer as well. It's so impossible to predict or project transfers into the recruiting classes.
There is, but there's always so many names out there that seem to make sense at the time. Yeah. So there will be people out there. We were just
talking about a couple months ago, Blake Henson, who we thought was going to maybe go to Mizzou originally out of high school and transferred from Ole Miss to Iowa State.
Mm-hmm. There's so many talented guys out there that just the first time around sometimes don't make the right choice, and maybe they're not in a great situation. There can be so many reasons that go into that, but they're just not in as good of a situation as they would like to be, and they kind of can come back on a second chance. And there's hundreds of names out there, so that option is always attractive to me. I think if there's names out there that fit and make sense.
I agree with you. So I'm going with Brookshire, Kita, and Caleb Brown. You're adding Zack Hicks as our official predictions for the high schoolers that will be joining the class of 2021 from Missouri. We'll have to wait a long time to see if we're completely correct, or, this is one of those classes where I could see 4 scholarships going to guys that we haven't even talked about.
I was just about to say that. We will probably be listening to this a year from now, looking at our predictions, and it'll be guys that we didn't even mention on this episode because we haven't heard of them. And that's probably not going to be a good thing if that is the case.
It's just crazy how different this year is from the previous 2.
Yeah.
2019, we knew who the guys were, and outside of Tamar Bates, we don't know who. We didn't know that Missouri was targeting Anton Brookshire until like a month before he committed.
Yeah.
If that.
Yeah, there was communication going on before the official offer, because I just don't think he would have committed a day later if they hadn't already built a relationship of some sort.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so moving on just real quick to 2022. I know it feels like a long time from now, but just a few people to keep an eye on. If you want your marquee guy who is somewhat regional and would make a huge impact day one, you're looking at Mark Mitchell, Kansas City area, but he's on the Kansas side, and he goes to a school called
Bishop Miege.
That's it. And he is currently the number 14 player in the country, number 1 in the state of Kansas. It's going to be really hard to keep him from going to KU. And he's got all the offers that you would expect from a 5-star top 15 player in the country. But I think Mizzou will at least kick the tires on that, see if there's any mutual interest.
They tend to do that for those players that they would never have a chance at.
Yep. Moving on to players that they might have a chance at, we have Taurus Reed from Chaminade. We talked a little bit about him before. He's a 6'10", and he's really talented.
Yeah, he's probably number 1 on my wish list for 22 class.
Yeah. Then we have the entire CBC basketball team, just about. Chandler Jackson and Larry Hughes Jr. are guards. Mikhail Abdul Hamid is a forward, and they're all going to be contributors at some point somewhere at the D1 level. How it shakes out exactly between the three of them, we'll have to wait and see, if we're talking about mid-major guys or high-major guys there and where Mizzou fits in. I'm at the point now where I almost said I'm at the point now where I just want to throw offers at all the in-state guys and be on them from day one and hope that they end up being good.
I mean,
I'm cringing so hard at me saying that, because that's like taking me back to a time I don't want to think about, Kyle. I don't want to think about a time where we were just giving offers to guys and then hoping they would be good basketball players.
Well, that's... Yeah. Are you sure we're out of that time period?
That's what I'm saying.
I was going to
CBC players.
Oh, yeah. Kanto has made it clear, at least I feel like, my perception, that the in-state, like the geography of these players doesn't mean a whole lot to him. He clearly, we've talked about Jordan Nesbit. That's what it is. The guy that lives here in Springfield, his name escapes me at the moment.
Oh, yeah.
Amin Muhammad. Probably not coming here, but there's been literally nothing that we know of between those two parties.
We have to assume that they said Mizzou, and he said no, and they said okay.
Which is fine, and you just move on. And, but it just doesn't really seem like you live in Missouri and you're good, so we're going to recruit you. That doesn't necessarily seem to be something he's considering.
And I know it's completely different from football. It is. Yeah, I shouldn't be really comparing them at all.
You don't have many spots in a basketball team. You got to really go after the guys that you really, really feel strongly about.
But when I see the presence that the football team has in recruiting in the state of Missouri right now, I just wish, I wish that there was some crossover there with the basketball team. It makes it so much easier to... I don't even know. It gets everybody on board in such a way that you just don't have when it's just silence from the staff and then just, signing a guy out of nowhere.
I agree. Eli Drinkwitz walks in, a gym or a high school football arena or something like that. A high school football arena. Have you ever heard that one? High school football field, a stadium or something. He walks into a crowd, he kind of commands the room a little bit. People kind of turn heads. Kanto Martin, I think, had that power at one point, but, he walks into a high school gym now. It's kind of like there, whatever. He's there. I'm kind of putting you on the spot. We didn't really plan this, but, what has happened? What has happened between, 2-3 years ago? And listening to, some of our prior episodes, we were saying things like, I feel like we can get any player in the state, and I feel like Kanto Martin is going to put us in a position to get these in-state guys, get the kind of recruit that we haven't had in a while. And like, what is it? Just like is it just the silence? Is it his personality or demeanor that feels like kind of puts us at a disadvantage? Like, what do you think?
I honestly don't think it's any of that. I think that we needed to see the marquee players in that first recruiting class. I'm talking about Michael Porter Jr., Jonte Porter, Jeremiah Tillman. We needed those three guys in particular to be what Missouri signed up for when they brought them on campus. And for all sorts of reasons, it didn't happen. Obviously, we know what happened with Michael and Jonte, and there's nothing the staff can do about that. You're always going to have injuries. Mm-hmm. But for the injuries that they had to be so debilitating to the team, when you have the player that you're building your team around, at least building the offense around, 2 years in a row go down for the entire season, it's so hard to come back from that. And what we've seen injury-wise and just how that first class was just like, it gave us Mizzou gold tinted glasses for the next 18 months.
Shocker.
Yeah. And it's so, when you see that recruiting class, you're going to be thinking, wow, something has changed, and is headed in the right direction. And that was the case. But you have to have the results in the win-loss columns for it to actually be momentum.
Yeah, we've kind of talked a little bit about Cuonzo Martin's personality. Obviously he's an incredibly intelligent and calm, collected guy, and seems like somebody that anybody would want as a mentor or as a leader in their life.
And we hear that over and over again from the players that he's recruiting.
And his press conferences, are always just sharing wisdom.
Yeah.
But you have to think if maybe that doesn't appeal to a younger guy. Maybe it's just like we're a little bit older, and we can really respect that, and some of the people in the media really respect that. But
maybe we're relating to the wisdom in his words a little bit more than a high schooler, probably.
Yeah,
I'm with you.
It's possible maybe that not clashes, but just isn't as interesting maybe to a younger player. And I think of Coach Drinkwitz. He has quite a bit of energy, charisma, and maybe that's exciting to players. I don't know. I have to agree with you that I think on-court performance has a lot to do with it.
Think about the players we can really look back on the last two classes and say, man, those are misses that hurt, and we were close on all of them. E.J. Liddell, Caleb Love, Cam Fletcher, Josh Christopher. 3 of those, just if everything was even, they just went to the vastly superior program. Josh Christopher going to Arizona State, I still think currently today, better program than Missouri. Mm-hmm. And he gets to play with his brother. I can talk about maybe Missouri should have sent an offer out to Josh's brother a long, long time ago, and maybe that would have made all the difference in the world there. But you can
kind of defend why Missouri's missed on some of these guys.
Yeah, and I can totally understand a player being like, yeah, Cuonzo's awesome. Like, my family loves him. I would love to learn from him, learn how to play basketball, learn how to be a man. But North Carolina, Ohio State, Kentucky.
It's true. That's a good point. And I think that's why this recruiting class, these guys we just talked about, it's really big for Cuonzo's future. And he has got to land some of these players that they really want. It's not like he's got to find some difference makers in this class, because he doesn't have that excuse to lean on if that's what happens. If he misses on all these guys, he can't say, well, it's tough to recruit against North Carolina because none of these guys are going to North Carolina.
Right.
So, that's a good point. And I think we'll see Cuonzo Martin really get tested in this recruiting class, and maybe we'll be able to kind of make a better conclusion about just his recruiting journey in general at Missouri after these guys have all committed somewhere.
That's a good way to end that segment, I have to say. Yep. I agree with everything you said there. We didn't talk about Javon Porter, though.
Oh, yeah. We got carried away.
His only offer, according to 24/7 Sports, is Missouri.
I actually didn't even know he had an offer.
Ranked 174 in the country for a class of 2022.
He has a couple of brothers that have played basketball.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just mentioned them about 30 seconds ago.
I thought Jonte was going to get some playing time potentially for the Grizzlies, and also Jaren Jackson Jr. just went down with an ACL tear, which is terrible news for him. But I actually thought that it might be might mean playing time for Jonte, but he still hasn't played any since that injury either. So, but we'll see. Long season. Not really long season. They have like a few games left. They don't have much time left.
Kyle says long season, and there's literally 4 games left in the season.
What's the other thing I say all the time? It's still a long way to go or something like that. I always love to say that.
Well, it's still a long way to go in the season that is Jonte's ability to play basketball in his career. So
yeah,
he'll have time, I think, to earn some minutes at some point. Well, I think that was a good dissection of Mizzou basketball recruiting as it stands here on August 6th, 2020.
We did our best.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's some names on here that you're just like, who is
Somebody
this guy?
on this list surely is going to end up at Missouri. We just don't know who, and we don't know when.
At least we're going to get Anton Brookshire, I think. Probably.
Surely hope so.
That better be the case.
You better not jinx it, buddy.
All right, Kyle, you want to send us out of here?
Oh, I'd certainly like to try. All right, guys, you can find this podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Podcasts. We're on Twitter and Instagram at Mizzou Sports Pod, and you can email us at MizzouSportsPod@gmail.com.
That won't work. It'd have to be MissouriSportsPod@gmail.com.
That'll also work.
No, it's the only one that'll work.
That will also work.
And we're also on YouTube.
We have like a bunch of people trying to email us. They're like, MizzouSportsPod@gmail.com. I swear to God, this is it.
Kyle says it every episode. Check us out on YouTube if you want to see the video version of this. A little bit more entertaining. If you just want to turn it on and mute it and so we can get some watch time, we would appreciate that. And throw us a subscription. Other than that, thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you next week.